Welcome back, ladies and gentle peasants, to the continuation of Theory Week. So this is the Theory Week where we are going into some of the deepest, darkest, most gritty Final Fantasy 15 theories out there, and they are all indeed mind-blowing as hell. But today we're going Solheim, the dark secrets of Solheim, the ancient civilization that was once the only standing civilization in Eos, and it was after their destruction that the nations of Tenebrae, Lucis, Niflheim and Accordo. But what do we know about Solheim? Of course, we know from the game that canonically it was destroyed in the Great War of Old, and that was around about 2000 years ago. Although the calendar system for this game is ME 700 and something, it was only at AE 700 years ago that the four nations that arose from the ashes of Solheim agreed to use the same calendar system. But Solheim was destroyed long before that, and what destroyed it? Well, they placed the blame on Ifrit. They say that it was Ifrit in the Great War of Old that destroyed Solheim because they blamed the Star Scourge on him. But we're beginning to see, as the pieces slowly unveil themselves, that this puzzle is a hell of a lot more complex than that, and that Ifrit isn't really to blame for it. But nevertheless, it was the Star Scourge that eradicated Solheim, a once great nation. The technological advancements of this ancient civilization were almost on par with what it is today in the game with Niflheim. But are Solheim really the innocent victims of warring gods, like the game made them out to be? Well, peasants, a lot of evidence says completely on the contrary. While Solheim did once stand as a proud and righteous nation, they worshipped Eos. Eos was their goddess, and in fact they were infatuated with her. They loved her so much that they even called the world itself Eos. That's where the name came from. It was Solheim naming it after their goddess. But like we have learned even in our own world today, all great nations, just like Rome, they all fall from the inside. They all fall to power, greed and lust, and in fact it seems that Solheim went a hell of a lot darker. They turned to a level of sadistic and crazed that, oh my goodness, this is going to add so much story to FF15 and to the backstory of Solheim and the world of Eos. So buckle up, you're going to need a seatbelt. Let's go! Just like the Rock of Ravito, like Pitioss, like vesperpool, every single dungeon in this game was telling a story. It was a clue. It was part of an intricately web of breadcrumbs that Square Enix left us, and it all goes back to Solheim. The remnants of this once great nation's architecture litters the entire map of Eos, and the people of Solheim, like I said, they worshipped Eos, but that love did extend to other gods, and it extended to the Astrals. And the Cosmology book in fact shows us that Solheim and the Astrals, they worked together. They worked together, walked alongside each other in the quest to attain great knowledge and prosperity for human civilization. Their greatest studies and rise in power, it came from sun worship and astronomical science, and Perona77 starts off the theory by saying that Solheim had built several monuments across the land of Lucis, but the most beautiful of them all, and the greatest accomplishment of Solheim, would have been the majestic Disc of Corus. It was the crown jewel of Solheim, before Ifrit pinned Titan down there with the meteor, ultimately resulting in the destruction of the Disc of Corus. But what was it? And Perona has gone into so much depth, this is crazy. So Corus, the disc, is a Latin portmanteau puzzle, and it translates to her hole the sundial. And her hole the sundial, it took Perona a hell of a lot to translate that. But then they remembered Dave's tattoo. No, that's going to sound ridiculous. Dave, he was just some standard scrub peasanty NPC. You can imagine that he, on a Saturday, he sits there and tunes into Final Fantasy Peasants and he watches some couple of tinfoil hat theories. Dave is just a normal dude, right? Well, in fact, guys, and I'm going to do a Messengers video in the very near future, a hell of a lot of the NPCs we saw were not as normal as we thought. And in fact, Dave, right now, I'll prove to you why. It's hard to see in the angle of this picture, but Eos, placed in the center of what looks like the exact same design as the Disc of Corus, even in this tattoo, holding the chains. And in Dave's tattoo is the whole story, because remember, Titan was the jailer of Pitioss and the jailer of Eos's tomb, and when Ifrit went down to get her, remember the tale of love and despair. And in fact, a lot of people have been curious on what was the relationship between Ifrit and Eos. You know, would Ifrit really go to save someone who was his lover, if Eos has had children with a mortal. No, a lot of people saying, oh, does this mean Eos is a hoe and she's got multiple partners? In fact, the theory is beginning to shape up that Eos was Ifrit's mother, the mother to almost all the astrals, and in fact to all of mankind. Because like I said, Eos's magic encompasses everything, and while we've seen it used to manipulate time and even bend the fabric of time, it is also the source of all life. And that's precisely why Niflheim used the crystal in the way that they use it, but I'll be getting onto that in a minute. They clocked onto this. They clocked on that their goddess was the source of all life, and when they turned dark and twisted and sadistic, and their power for greed and even immortality, they turned on their goddess. And in fact, evidence shows that they tried to use her to actually acquire everlasting life and immortality. But we're jumping ahead of ourselves. I'll get onto that bit in a minute. What Dave's tattoo and the translation of her hold the sundial, it actually means that the disc of Corus was once a gigantic sun clock. And this was the entire region that this sun clock was built over. That's how big this was. It was huge, guys. It was a wonder of the world. But as the theory goes, the pitioss theory, remember I said that Ifrit shot meteors down into Earth as a way to tunnel into the Earth to try to find the location of Eos. But unfortunately for Ifrit, the one that he shot down over the disc of Corus was caught by Titan. But nevertheless, the meteor still did phenomenal amounts of damage. It smashed the sundial to oblivion. But because the base structure of it was made from mithril, a rare orb that was revered by Solheim, and one that is still rare in the world of Eos today, they made it from the absolute finest ore. The base structure of the sundial still holds structure today and stands tall in the centre of the map of Dusksky, but with cooled magma and melted rock and melted lava and thousands of years of age has covered it over. Yet it still functions as a clock to this day. It still serves its purpose. What was the original shape it was built in? The prime structure, that of a wing. Another bit of reverie and worship to their goddess Eos. And there was even a video on YouTube, it has since been removed by the user, but someone actually showed that the great arches, those stone arches, they looked natural, although they're not natural. Rocks don't form that way. They don't form in these perfect arches. But someone actually showed that with the day and night cycles that Square Enix had implemented into that game, the arches actually work as remarkably accurate markers for the sun. And it really does, it still serves its purpose as a clock. Square Enix even tied this sundial into their day and night cycles. And this picture beautifully illustrates that. The grand sun clock of Eos. Oh wow, look at that. The point of the observer in the middle. Twilight, early morning, sunset, moonset, midday, midnight. You can see it, guys. It's all there. Wow. But the theory on this clock goes even deeper. Because again, those great stone arches that act as the markers, again, they're not natural, and meteors don't cause that. When meteors come down, as Perona rightly points out, they're only capable of creating a crater. So who helped create the arches? Well, there's only one logical explanation, and that is Titan. He is the Archaean. He would be the only one capable to create great stone arches like that. And this once again heralds back to a time when Solheim and the Astrals worked hand in hand. This is when Solheim were at their finest, where they loved and observed nature, when they were pure and when they had a regard for the planet that they lived on. This was them in their purest of days. But would Solheim, such a technologically advanced country or nation, build such a huge thing just to be able to tell the time of day that it was? Of course they wouldn't. And there's some real evidence that this was more than just your typical clock. This was more of an astronomical clock. And these kind of mechanisms even live today, something that has special mechanisms and dials that display astronomical information, such as relative positions to the sun, moon, zodiacal constellations, and sometimes even major planets. A study of all things in the universe. And Perona courteously even pointed out, in Orlage, located in Pram, this is one of the most famous examples of an astronomical clock. And it just so happens that on this exact example of one of the most famous astronomical clocks in Prague, in the real world, there happens to be a statue. And look at this picture, guys. The top left image is a statue seen on the Prague clock. The bottom is a winged statue found throughout Lutetia. And it looks remarkably like the tattoo on Dave's arm. Remember, the tattoo on his other side is the disc of Corus and the clock, and on his left arm is something that connects to an astronomical clock. This is unbelievable. And again, guys, you have to remember, why would Dave have this kind of information tattooed on his body? Something lost to the pages of time. I'm afraid to say, as hard as it is to believe, because he just seemed so normal, Dave is not a normal person, and in fact a hell of a lot of the NPCs are. A little teaser, because I can't wait to do those messenger videos and do some videos on some of the NPCs aren't who we think they are. Can't wait to do that video. Viv and Sanya both also wear astronomical watches. So just bear that in mind, guys. But continuing on, so after Ifrit rescued Eos from Pitioss, he burned her at the Rock of Ravito, purified her heart, and the ashes of Eos spread the microorganisms of the Star Scourge into the atmosphere. And I'm going to do a section in this video in a minute that's going to explain why the Star Scourge came from Eos's burned body. I know I've said this before, some people really wanted an explanation of it. It is coming up. But before that, did a civilization that had spent hundreds, perhaps even thousands of years building up their technology, becoming the advanced nation they were, did they deserve to have it all torn down in the blink of an eye? Well, I believe they did. Looking at what they later went on to build, none of it was anything like the Disc of Corus. That was something pure and honest, but a lot of the other stuff they built was dark and macabre, and one of the worst of them all, in my opinion, was the Steyliff Grove. This is just one of the 3 places and key hints that Square Enix showed us that Solheim, it had given into its hubris, it had given into its greed, its lust for power, and Square Enix even dropped the hints about Solheim before we entered. Through the characters, the bros before we entered Steyliff, Prompto, Ignis, even Arania, they say, oh, what happened to the locals? Well, let's go in and find out. This clip here.
What kind of place was this? Any idea, Ignis?
None.
Gee, I wonder what happened to the locals.
Why not head inside and look for them?
And you see, as I've been talking about Solheim, I've been using Aztec footage, Aztec reenactment, and I've been mentioning it throughout this video because everything connects to the Aztec in such an uncanny way, down to the sun worshipping, down to the ritualistic sacrifices, down to the temple architecture, down to the astronomy, which is exactly what the Disc of Corus was based around. This is just a part of my theory. This wasn't really what Perona focused on, but even what wiped the Aztecs out is a mirror image of what happens in this game. I'm telling you guys, even when we head into Steyliff, there's going to be a huge Easter egg of a classic summon based on an Aztec king. All of this is far too much of a coincidence, and the Aztecs, they followed this similar path. An ancient civilization, far more advanced beyond their years. But just like the Aztecs, they had this dark side. They turned to some pretty crazy ritualistic, tear your heart out and eat it in front of your face, that kind of crazy shit. Even as far as having a dark, crazed obsession with trying to acquire immortality through their beliefs. And this is exactly what Solheim did in Steyliff. The goddess they once worshipped for being the life of all things, they turned on her and they wanted to beat death. And the imagery in Steyliff really showed this. There were these twisted, bizarre tree roots, sick, ill-looking tree roots running through the places, demonstrating Solheim's turn against nature. In my previous video that I talked about time stemming from Eos's power, and there was a hell of a lot of stuff happening with time in this game that just flew over our heads. Even this dungeon, certain bridges would collapse and then time would just reverse itself and the dungeon would just restructure itself. This whole dungeon is infused with Eos's magic, or should I say a pretty sick twisted version of it. Even when you look at the skeletons, the abominations, those skeletons that are walking around, it goes to show undead life. And this is another demonstration of when Solheim tried to cheat immortality. Even the entire structure of the craziest part of the dungeon. Remember we went down there with Arania and there was this suspended water. Remember how freaked out the guys were about it? There was this suspended water in this chamber and the whole hall was made to resemble, get this guys, the inside of a womb. And it really did. And there's even this whole theory that the crystal isn't Eos's heart. It's actually a womb. And it's something that all of life stems from, and that was the one part that Ifrit was able to purify and save. And if Ifrit hadn't have undergone the purification at the Rock of Ravito and salvaged the womb of Eos, all of life would have been doomed, because all of life stems from Eos. And that's why, as crazy and hard as it is to believe, Ifrit is kind of the unintentional hero of the game. But with this dungeon full of skeletons and reapers and necromancers, everything that indicates necromancy, trying to defy death and this is what Solheim turned to. This is the kind of dark magic they turned to, and even in that chamber, there was none other than Quetzalcoatl, or Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl, and even that had a meaning. Quetzalcoatl, he was the Aztec god of wisdom, associated with the planet Venus, and of the dawn, and of none other than fertility. That's right guys, Quetzalcoatl being there was a sneaky clue of fertility, and that is what Solheim were trying to do there. They were almost trying to use this place to create artificial life, and you can even see on the walls there are catacombs lining the walls. It's like a twisted mortuary, and they were dabbling in dark necromancy, trying to bring back the dead. And even just look at the name, Steyliff Grove, could easily be interpreted as Steyliff Grove. But moving swiftly on to the next location, Coastalmark, and this place stands silently in a lonely corner of Dusky. And this place, these were the remains of a Solheim's version of what Perona says was the Tower of Babel. This was how big this thing was, and you can't really see from the ruins, but this place would have stand hugely tall, so tall in fact that even one of the graves, one of Noctis' ancestors nearby, was actually called the Tall King. He saw it fit to have his tomb placed nearby. Another little teaser of just how tall this place was. But Coastalmark, this was built by Solheim at a time when they had moved far beyond worshipping Eos, and that their greed for power, it had consumed them completely. And as we descend into the dungeon, and it is a pretty hefty descent, you descend down and down and down.
Wonder how deep it goes.
And as you go down, it gets darker and darker until suddenly there's a huge design flip up, and we walk into some really weird room. I remember thinking, what the hell is this place about? There was all these futuristic contraptions, and I remember staring at these and not for the life of me being able to figure out what the hell this contraption did. But this is the pinnacle of, although it is dark, this shows the pinnacle of Solheim's technological advancement. They built this thousands of years ago, and we see a replica of this in none other than, check this out guys, in Gralia. This spinning apparatus with huge tubes and red glowing lights, Gralia had the exact same one. And from that alone, peasants, I think you can guess that the purpose of these are nothing but sinister. And you'd be right for thinking that. Sinister indeed. They built this huge, beautiful tower for one purpose: to steal Eos's power. And their once great grand sundial that they made, the Disc of Corus, they even turned that to something dark and sinister, something that was once the pride of Solheim. They tarnished it. And in fact, what these contraptions did, so goes the theory, is that it would start by absorbing the sun through the day from the sun, and then transferring it to none other than the mithril wing of the disc. This tower would transfer the sunlight across Dusky to the disc and then feed it down into the earth. They did this because the Disc of Corus was built above an access point of Pitioss, so lurking beneath the disc was the goddess, Eos, goddess of the dawn. That's why Ifrit aimed a meteor at the disc. It was an access point, and Solheim were using this. Their imprisoned goddess was beneath the Disc of Corus. Now again, did Solheim imprison her? Well, I don't think mortals would have the power to imprison a goddess, but this is where the astrals come involved. Remember I said about the crime Eos committed, and this is real evidence that Solheim and the other astrals are very much responsible for the Star Scourge, for the crime against Eos, and now you can see why Ifrit turned his back on the gods, and indeed why he aided in destroying Solheim. But why were they transferring sunlight down into Pitioss? Well, it's because they wanted their goddess's power, and without access to the dawn, Eos inevitably began to wither and die. Her power began to seep away. Of course, Solheim, they couldn't have that. So they would feed sunlight down to Eos, but at the same time, this machine would also extract the power of Eos, and they would use it to harness as part of their experiments for immortality and creating artificial life. And that's the link, guys. That is exactly why Niflheim is using the exact same power that Solheim used. Niflheim do create artificial life. They create the Magitech. That's what the catacombs. It's all a replica of what Solheim were doing thousands of years ago. And the thing is, did Niflheim figure this out? No, it was Ardyn Izunia. Ardyn is the one who brought the Magitech infantry. He told them the secrets. Where did Ardyn learn it from? He learned it all from Solheim. The absolute irony that the methods of the ancient civilization and the technology that was used to kill his mother, Ardyn uses it for revenge. Oh my goodness. And this is why I want to talk about artificial life. This is the proof that Eos's magic is the creation of life. And that's why I'm going to go on to talking about the crystal being a womb. I said it was the heart, but that's because it just simply looked like a heart. And I know this is really creepy, guys, but there's evidence for this. Look at the crystal in Niflheim. Look at what is connected to the crystal. Needles. And the purpose that these needles are serving is all of this wispy energy. These are souls. This is the energy of life. These needles are actually absorbing that power from the crystal, feeding it into the catacombs, the exact same kind that were in Steyliff, and that is what is bringing artificial life to the Magitech. And even more proof that it is the womb, even when we just look at Noctis, throughout trailers, even back as far as verses 13, Noctis has always been described as the son of the dawn. Why was Noctis called the son of the dawn? Well, if this is Eos's womb, Noctis gets brought into the crystal to become the king of light. He actually gets taken into Eos's womb and then reborn through the crystal. He's born again as the son of the dawn. Are you seeing the links, guys? Are you seeing them? And the thing is, when Solheim tried to use it, create immortality for their human bodies, it didn't work. It turned into abomination. It turned into undead horrors. And that's because we saw that when Noctis touched the light, Ardyn was, oh, the light hasn't harmed you. A chosen king indeed. Noctis is the only one worthy of a pure rebirth through the crystal, and that's where Solheim failed. That's why they couldn't achieve immortality, and that's why the only thing that actually is able to use it are abominations such as Magitech. That's not true life, it's artificial life, and it's a twisted version of Eos's magic, but that's all they've been able to accomplish. Noctis is the purest version of that rebirth. And just going into the animation of the Magitech are made up of a number of things. It is made up of a human shell. So there is a part of a bit of a human in there, but they're completely lost and they aren't even identifiable as a person. Remember, Prompto was raised as an MT. They're called MTs, and that was Prompto's destiny, to become a Magitech. But besides the armor on the outside, there's also a stone husk inside. And this is the thing, look at a Magitech soldier without its helmet on. It has a stone face. It seems a part of this reanimation, it could be a human brain, a human heart, any of the key human organs, but the actual husk of it is a statue. It's a stone statue. And what are we seeing here now, guys? People have been asking me, why is it that if Ifrit didn't take Eos's body from Pitioss and burn it, why is there a statue of her? Who created the statue? Here's the answer. When Solheim trapped their goddess down and they tried to keep her alive as long as possible, she was still slowly dying. So they kept her going with sunlight, and this whole process of feeding sunlight from the tower to the wing down to Eos and absorbing it back. This is even depicted in the Genesis artwork. Look at this, guys. You can actually see the figure of a tower transferring light to the figure of a wing. This is the entire process, guys. Oh my goodness. It's real, guys. It's real. But knowing that their goddess was still dying, that's why Solheim knew they needed another answer. They couldn't let go of their strive for immortality. They couldn't let it go. And therefore, they created an exact replica of their chained goddess down in Pitioss. A like for like, chains and all, even the exact same position, in the hope that they would perfect the reanimation technology, the exact same thing that's being used for the Magitech, and they would be able to reanimate their stone goddess. And who knows what part of the human, they probably would have used her womb or her heart, we don't know. But the whole operation was shut down by Ifrit. He's the one who went down and reclaimed her heart or her womb. I'm going to go with a womb at this point. That's why I don't think Ifrit is that bad a villain. And rounding out this absolutely mind-boggling video, I said I would prove how was it that Eos's burned body is what released the Star Scourge. Well, Square Enix actually explained to us the science of the Star Scourge. They got real scientific. Now remember I said down in Pitioss that there were these butterflies, blue butterflies, and they represented the soul. Well, that's really what they look like. But there's actually a little bit more to them. They're actually demonic dragonflies. They're actually a parasite. Now this sounds crazy, but this is where it originated from. These parasites that had wings and lived down in Pitioss, this is where it all came from. And here's the evidence, guys. Look at the butterfly in the background. This was the picture they showed us as to where the star scourge came from. So when Solheim's goddess, Eos, goddess of the dawn, she was shackled down in Pitioss and they fed light down to her. Well, in that dark place, you can imagine that any form of light would have been like moths to a flame for these parasitic winged creatures. They swarmed over her, was drawn to her, bit her, and slowly, bit by bit, the scourge infected her. She was the first to be infected by these parasitic winged beings, and we've never seen those winged things actually outside of Pitioss because they never left Pitioss. It was finally when Ifrit took Eos and cremated her body that the star scourge was released into the parasitic form. It then turned into the parasite form, was released into the air. So who created the star scourge? Who's responsible for it? Solheim and the other astrals. Not Ifrit, it's the other astrals. And that's what wiped Solheim out. They got what they deserved. They got their just reward. And that's why what destroyed Solheim, it was a combination of Ifrit's wrath. I have no doubt that whoever survived from Solheim, Ifrit went back to destroy them and burn them to the ground for vengeance. Again, that's why he fired a meter at the disc of Corus. But it was also the star scourge. And you know why this is even more Aztec? On top of the Quetzalcoatl, the sun worshipping, and all the other links, that's exactly what wiped the Aztecs out. It is beyond coincidence at this point that there are so many parallels between the Aztecs and Solheim and what wiped the Aztecs out. A lot of historians got it wrong. They said that it was the Spanish. That the Spanish came over, they invaded and they annihilated the Aztecs. That's not true, guys. What actually killed the Aztecs, one of the most advanced civilizations, they reached an advancement as much as Rome, but hundreds of years before. What actually killed them? Wiped out half their population and crippled the other half. It was a disease, guys. It was actually the smallpox that wiped out the Aztecs. They didn't have immunity to European diseases. And when the Spanish came over in search for Aztec gold, that's what wiped them out. Oh my goodness. I cannot believe Square Enix buried such a huge core story in so much obscurity. And I know there's going to be comments saying, I'm annoyed that Square Enix didn't show this more clearer, because this is an amazing dope story. I wish this was more obvious. I can't believe it's taken Perona77, an absolute tinfoil hat archaeologist genius with his archaeology fanny pack, to delve through this game and dig through it to finally come up with this, because this is amazing. This kind of depth and detail in a game is incredible, and Square Enix, all I can say is now I know it, guys. My level of appreciation for 15's story is so high. But just rounding out this video, there's going to be far more theories to come about how Ardyn plays an even deeper role in all of this. But I was actually looking at Bible references. I was actually having a chat with a fellow peasant, not even Perona, and we were going through Bible quotes that are scarily connected to this entire backstory of Ifrit and Eos. And as I was reading through Perona's Eos Revelations, I realised why they called it Revelations. Throughout the story of 15, we have all theorised about Lucifer. Some of the artwork has looked very religious at times. I mean, even this one, it looks very Christ-like. And I believe that was Ardyn possibly being born down in Pitioss. That was kind of my theory on this. But there's been a lot of real biblical feeling to a lot of the artwork. And in Revelations chapter 9 verses 1 to 3, it goes, "Then the fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to earth, and it was given the key to the pit of the abyss." And the theory is that meteor opened up the hole to Pitioss, but the star opened the pit of the abyss, and smoke rose out of it like a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke from the pit, and out of the smoke locusts descended on the earth, and they were given the power like that of scorpions of the earth. Oh my goodness, guys. That could word for word be talking about the star scourge. But going over to the other Bible quote, and I was talking, this was with peasant Leah Miranda, so major shout out to you. They came out, remember I said that all these dungeons are linked, all of these dungeons have a place in this underlay of story, this wealth of hidden story, and vesperpool was one of them. And quickly refreshing the story, I said that that was a reference to the goddess, the god or demigod Hesperus, and he was one of the sons of Eos. And he was a demigod, and how that meant evening star, sorry, I'm getting confused, evening star, and in Vesperpool we found the rogue of the star. Well, the story doesn't end there. Remember I said Eos had twins? Well, in the mythology, Eos doesn't just have Hesperus, she also has another son. This son is called Phosphorus. And I think you know that there's been enough juxtaposition in 15 to see where this is going. With the florets representing the light and Noctis' house representing the dark, Eos had two sons. Hesperus was the evening star and Phosphorus was the morning star. And remember I said that Ardyn, if this theory is correct, if he is a son of the dawn and he is a demigod, that he has to either be then Hesperus or Phosphorus. Well, I believe he's Phosphorus. And he represents the fallen son of the dawn. Hesperus could either be Izunia or whoever Ardyn's brother was that betrayed him. There is a little theory going on that Izunia is Ardyn's mother, but I'll get into that another time. Whoever the brother was that betrayed Ardyn. And the reason this links up, again, with biblical references is because if indeed Ardyn is Phosphorus, the morning star, well, that's exactly what Lucifer is. Morning Star is literally another name for Lucifer. If anyone has seen the TV series, you'll know his full name is Lucifer Morning Star. And then there's the whole links to Lucifer and Lucis, and there's even a quote in the Bible. In Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 to 14, God says, "How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid nations low." Ardyn is fallen and he is the son of the dawn. It all connects, it all ties, and just I was working on that theory, and then to even see Perona. This theory is somehow combined with Greek mythology, is combined with biblical mythology, and it's combined with Aztec mythology. And there's also a nice little sprinkling of Norse mythology. God damn, Square Enix, how did you manage to craft a story? I am absolutely in love with this story. I can say, knowing what I know now, I'm in love with the depth of 15 story, and I can't say I've ever enjoyed a post game as much as this. And to think there's still DLC to come. The fact is, I just want some sort of confirmation from Square, because at this point there's just too much to say that none of this is real. I mean, seriously guys, it gets to a point where you're no longer in the realms of coincidence. We have long left that ship. I'm going to round this out by saying Final Fantasy has always had religious tones to it, and what Final Fantasy 15 has done, I'm absolutely speechless. Final Fantasy has always kind of not mocked religion, but there has been memes saying that Final Fantasy shitting on religion since 1984. This goes even deeper, because this whole thing of sun worship, this whole thing of astronomy, if you actually research on the internet, historians have actually come to conclude that religion as we know it today, religion in the form we know it today, it actually all stems from ancient astrology and sun worship. And here we have a backstory of sun worship. We even have our main villains connected to astrology. Guys, even the astrals are connected to planets. Another part of Perona's theory is that they have uncovered that there's a real hierarchy of high astrals, medium astrals, low astrals, and demons, and also the messengers. But the high astrals, there were in fact once 9 of them, not the 6 that we know, but 3 of them were killed in the Great War. And those are Odin. He was killed in the Great War and he represented Mercury. Siren represented Venus. Shiva to Earth. Ifrit to Mars. Rama to Jupiter. Bahamut to Saturn. Titan to Uranus. Leviathan to Neptune. And Doomtrain to Pluto. What I'm trying to say here, guys, is that with sun worship and astrology in this game, is Final Fantasy 15 hasn't just done what many Final Fantasies have done, which is tease stories challenging religion, which they have done. They've always challenged religion. I mean, especially in Final Fantasy 13, the pretty much entire premise was them getting to a place where the world didn't need God and religion anymore. In Final Fantasy 10, the whole thing was about we don't need religion anymore, and showing the corruption of religion and the Yevon religion. It has been done in many Final Fantasies, but FF15, it has gone one step further. It has challenged the very roots of where religion in our real world stems from. And it was all done through an elaborate web of dungeons and a dark and somewhat horrifying backstory of the nation of Solheim. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and then go spasm on the floor like I'm about to. Until the next video, Kupo! Hold up. I've just realised, now that we know what the crystal really is, that's kind of weird. Final Fantasy 15 is literally a story about protecting, then stealing, then climbing into a dead bird's womb. At least I can't say you never failed to surprise me, Square.